Hi everyone and welcome to our friendly world. My name is Kennedy and in this video I'll be showing you how to crochet your very own little lavender sprig. This pattern makes one individual sprig of lavender, so you can make a couple to use loosely as finishing touches for other projects, or you can make a whole bunch of them and put them together as your very own lavender bouquet. In order to complete this pattern, you will need yarn in the color you want to use for the stem, yarn in the color you want to use for the lavender petals, a skewer of some kind. This is a bamboo skewer. It's about 8 inches long, and I used a semi-pointed tip so that it's not too pointy, a crochet hook, scissors, and some hot glue and a hot glue gun. The gauge for this pattern isn't super important, so you can play around with different hook sizes and yarn weights until you're happy with the look of the lavender that you've created. But in this video, I'll be using worsted weight yarn. This is Wool of the Andes from Crochet.com and a Clover 3.25 millimeter hook. Now, I do want to mention this pattern is pretty beginner friendly and only uses a few simple crochet techniques. But if this is your very first time crocheting, you'll first want to go through our Learn to Crochet video guide. So below this video, you will find the link to our downloadable guide, which will walk you through a few different steps for learning the basics of crochet. So like I said, if this is your first time crocheting, make sure you go through that Learn to Crochet guide first. But if you're just starting out as a beginner and you've already got the basic techniques down, you'll find this pattern pretty simple. The first thing we're going to do is crochet the piece that we're going to use as the lavender flowers. So with your purple yarn or whatever color you want to use for the flowers, you're going to create a slip knot and you want to leave a long yarn end. So a few extra inches here I have hanging off the end of my yarn. Go ahead and tighten that knot to your hook. And now we're going to create a pretty long chain. And you can, as you make more of these lavender pieces, you can adjust the length of this chain. It will change how much of the skewer is taken up by the purple lavender section. So if you want less of the flower showing, you can do a shorter chain. I'm going to chain about 60, and the nice thing about this pattern is that it only is a repeat of one stitch. So you don't have to be exact about the number of stitches you create. So I'm just going to go ahead and continue to yarn over and pull through that loop to create a chain. And like I mentioned before, if you're not familiar with how to chain, you can check out the video for that on our YouTube channel. But just go ahead and continue to work your chain until you have about 60 chains. All right, now I have my long chain made here, and now we're just going to do slip stitches and chains down the length of this chain. So skipping the first 2 chains, you're going to insert the hook into the 3rd chain from the hook. So I'm skipping the first 2, and then in this 3rd chain, create a slip stitch. So you're going to insert your hook, pull yarn over and pull through both loops on the hook, and you've created a slip stitch. Now chain 2, 1 and 2, and moving to the next chain, you're going to create a slip stitch again. And this is what you're going to do all the way down the length of this chain. So chain 2, slip stitch into the next chain, chain 2, slip stitch into the next chain. And this will start to curl up on you. And that's totally okay because we're going to be wrapping it around the skewer anyway. So this might get a little bit bunchy as you work, but you're just going to continue chaining 2 and then slip stitch in the next chain. And these little bumps that we're creating here will give us the look of those tiny little lavender petals when we wrap this around the bamboo. So go ahead and repeat this to chain 2 and slip stitch all the way down the remainder of the piece. I've made it down to my very last chain, so I'm again going to chain 2, slip stitch in that final chain. And now you can cut the yarn, leaving a few inches of a tail. And I'm just going to pull that yarn tail right through the loop on my hook and pull it all the way through to tie a knot. So now we've finished off our curly little lavender piece that we're going to use to create the flowers, and we can start adding this to the skewer. Now this is where your bamboo skewer and your hot glue come in. Make sure you have something to protect your working surface. And as we add this flower piece to the stick, we always want to keep the straight edge at the bottom and the bumpy edge at the top. So I'm stretching this out so that you can see it a little better, but we're always keeping that straight chain edge toward the bottom and then the picot edge toward the top there. And we're going to start at the very tip of the skewer, adding some hot glue. And you can be sparing with this, you don't have to pile it on. And keeping the straight edge toward the bottom, I'm just going to secure the end of my lavender piece to the skewer. You can just give that a minute to set. And now we're going to carefully wrap this piece around the skewer, and it's going to want to twist, but you're always going to keep that bumpy edge facing up toward the top. And if you want to add glue throughout here to secure it, you can, but we're securing the top and the bottom for sure, so it may not need that extra security, but if you're using a little bit more slippery yarn, you might want to add some extra glue. So I'm just continuing to wrap this, and each time I'm always making sure that the straight edge is down toward the bottom. And you can see now how the length of this chain would adjust how much of the piece is taken up by the purple. If you wanted less of this to be purple, you would just make a shorter chain when you start. Now I'm down to the end, and I'm going to add a little bit more glue so that I can secure this end of the piece. And I'm going to wrap it through the glue and then even wrap these yarn tails around just a couple times to add a little bit extra security. I'm just going to hold this for a second to let it set. And then once you feel like those ends are secured, you can trim them off. And I'm still going to leave about an inch or so here, and we'll just wrap that up with the next piece that we add. And now for creating the stem, we aren't even going to be crocheting, we're just going to be wrapping the skewer in our green yarn. So go ahead and find the end of your yarn. And now up here at the base of the lavender flowers, I'm going to tie this in a knot. So I'm just wrapping the yarn around the skewer and tying a knot to secure it right at the base of the petals. And then keeping the short yarn tail down along the stick, along with those extra yarn tails from the lavender. I'm just going to tightly wrap this all the way around. And you want there to not be too many gaps between these wraps. And you're just keeping it as close as you can. And once I've wrapped the yarn tails a couple of times, I like to trim them just to make it a little bit less bulky down the rest of the piece. So now I have those trimmed up. I'm just going to continue wrapping this as tightly and as closely as I can get it, all the way down to the bottom. And as I approach the bottom here, I'm again going to add just a little bit of glue. You don't have to glob this on. You can be pretty sparing with it, especially because you don't want to burn your fingers on that hot glue. And just continue wrapping until you reach the very end. And now I'm going to let this set. And if the glue cools a little bit and you're comfortable with it, you can sort of tap it down over the end of the yarn there, but don't do that until it's already close to cool because you don't want to burn your fingers. And then once your glue has set, trim off the yarn as close to the piece as you can get it. And just like that, you have created your little lavender stem. Now that you have finished off your first lavender stem, you can see how quickly these pieces come together, and you can work to crochet an entire bouquet of lavender in no time. Also, if you're using wool yarn, you can add some lavender essential oil to the petals so that your finished pieces are scented like lavender as well, and you can set them around the house or in a vase or even create a bouquet to gift to a friend. This pattern is also available in a full written and photo illustrated PDF pattern that also has some bonuses showing you how to add leaves to your lavender stems. And it's also available as an eco-friendly crochet kit, so if you're interested in those, check out the links below the video to shop at Our Friendly World. I can't wait to see all of the beautiful lavender stems you create with this quick little pattern, and as always, happy stitching!